Good morning. Well, the community prepared for the worst, and whilst the impacts aren't as severe as years gone by, there is no doubt that there will be impacts on individuals at home, in their businesses, on the roads they drive, on the crops they produce. And my message today is we are here to see them through. And I want to thank the Mayor for joining us today, as well as Grantley Marcus for his efforts in helping coordinate on the ground. The peak here in Bundaberg at the Burnett River will reach somewhere in the mid 7 metres. To put that in perspective, in 2010 it got to about 7.9 metres. In 2013 it got to 9.5 metres, and that was a massive flood for this community, and one that certainly rocked it. And whilst the impacts won't be of that scale, there will be individuals who will be impacted to the same level. And the Mayor will go through some of those figures following the state disaster meeting we just had. But I make this point, there are people whose homes and businesses have now been impacted for the 4th time in just over 15 years. That's a big blow, and it's hard to keep picking yourself up off the canvas, but I want them to know that we'll be here to help them, and proud communities like this find a way to keep bouncing back. But just because they're resilient doesn't mean they should be left to their own devices, and we have to make sure that we give every opportunity for people to be able to rebuild their homes, to be able to rebuild their businesses, to be able to drive on the roads, and they shouldn't be left alone because they are strong people. Overnight, emergency services did a great job. I saw this morning traffic controllers and police and fireys making sure that people didn't cross the bridge. We had 197 people in the evacuation centre here overnight in Bundaberg. Had a couple of dozen the night before in Gayndah and Bundaberg, and again, it's important that we acknowledge that. Equally importantly, that we acknowledge those people who open their homes to friends and family who might be impacted to come. That's community spirit on display. We had another rescue overnight, someone driving into floodwater. Again, I want to thank those personnel who were involved with that, putting their life at risk to be able to save somebody who endangered their own, and I do want to thank them for that. There are major warnings across a number of catchments over a really large part of this state, and that's not going to disappear anytime soon, and it's important that those communities are cognizant of that, and I'm just going to mention that in a moment. But first, I want to turn to the resources that have been pre-deployed in places across the state, and you'll see why I'm so proud of the work of emergency services and many of those volunteer organisations. Here in Bundy, there are 30 police plus water police. There's around about 3 dozen SES crews, and more are arriving shortly. Polaire's just arrived, which you would have heard. We've got 4 swiftwater rescue crews. We've got ergon workers from other locations coming in to help, and that tells you everything you need to know about them. And I spoke to you at the start of this year's disaster season, and I said that we'd done the work more so than at any time of our history, and I do believe that's paying dividends in the way that we've pre-positioned our assets, and also the way that we can turn things back on far quicker than what we've seen before. So just on that, I make the observation that there was around about 2,000 homes without power, and the work that happened that I mentioned to you yesterday will enable that substation here in Bundy to be re-energised in a fifth of the time of what we've seen in years gone by, and that's the difference between people being able to get back and rebuild their lives. We spoke about the fact that the homes that are impacted will need local sparkies to go and check it before it's reconnected. The council's doing some work to make sure that that work happens quickly as well, so I'm very grateful. One of the things that I've noticed and I observed this morning on the statewide call is about schools. Today across the entire state there's only 3 state schools closed and 5 independent and Catholic schools closed. That's a credit to the people who work in our education system, and the principals, the teachers, the parents. It is so important that people are able to do normal things, and one of those normal things is be able for the kids to go to school safely and for them to be able to go to work, and the fact that they stay open enables communities to go about their business and parents to go and earn a living. They're really important, so wherever it's safe to do so, it's important that we keep kids at school, and that's been a remarkable effort across the board. I want to turn to roads. Right now there's 640 warnings on the Queensland Traffic website on one way or another. Shows you the scale of this across so much of the state. The Bruce Highway has just reopened with caution, but there are a number of roads that are closed across Queensland and will be for some time. I do, however, want to reflect a story that came this morning on our statewide call. On the back of bridge assessors staying in some of the smaller communities, we've already had roads reopen the moment water has fallen. And that's the difference between communities being able to be connected or remaining isolated. And there still are a number of communities that are isolated. But the fact that you have those experts, those engineers who are prepared to go in early and then be there rather than have to commute from Brisbane in many cases, and the time that takes, that's another one of those things that we put in place that will help get communities back on their feet. And there's going to need to be a lot of assessment done in the days and weeks ahead. Chinchilla, Charlie's Creek continues to rise. The peak's not expected until well into tomorrow. You would have seen the images of the businesses that have been impacted. Right now, the Mayor advises us that there hasn't been homes that have been impacted, but that's on a knife's edge. And as the water continues to rise, they'll be preparing in the event that those homes are impacted. But to see the main street at Chinchilla, the way that's been impacted, that affects so many people's lives. That's the difference between somebody being able to go to work and earn a living and someone who's invested everything in those businesses. Let me just turn quickly further west. There remains some huge impacts to people's livelihoods, particularly in agriculture, right along that western run. And it's still a couple of days before we'll see the peak at Longreach, and even more so out to Bundaberg. Those communities were impacted by rain a couple of weeks ago, and they're still suffering the impacts of that. And I want them to know that we'll be here for them. Isolation continues across much of Queensland, and to put that into perspective, some of the communities that I visited in the shadows of the end of last year in the northwest of the state, many of those communities are still impacted. The Flinders Highway cut at multiple locations. It's now been several months, and they are wearing the strain of that. And we have to do all we can to enable life to go back to normal the moment the water recedes. Agricultural impacts, it's extremely early days, but I can report that we now have 122 surveys in, and we've lost 1,200 head of cattle, 1,000 k of fences, and that's just here. I'm just talking in the Burnett, Fraser Coast, Gympie area. As you know, there's been over 100,000 head of cattle lost during the course of this event from the back end of last year across northwest Queensland, but it just shows you that that impact continues. There will be significant impact for crops, a number of crops. I'm talking, everything from cotton to grain, macadamias. There'll be impacts for sugarcane. It'll be immense, and we'll be here to make sure that we do the assessment, and we work with the federal government to make sure that those agricultural producers, the business owners, the people they support, can get back on their feet as quickly as possible. And that will mean rolling the event from last event to this one, so that there's no daylight between response and recovery in that regard. To health services, the Bundaberg Hospital is fully operational, and I want to thank everyone involved. There was some minor flooding that impacted the car park as well as staff quarters, and yet the show continued. And I want to thank everyone who works in that system for their work. There were some elective surgery that was cancelled, but that was either because of patients who couldn't get in or staff that were also couldn't get in. But the hospital continued to operate, and I'm very grateful for them. There's a number of the smaller multi-purpose health centres across the state that have been impacted, and they're liaising directly with the people who are affected. But overwhelmingly, a shout out to everyone who works in the health system. In times like these, you realise how important it is to have a world-class health system in every part of this state, and I'm grateful for the men and women who make it up. So finally, before I hand over to the Mayor, I just want to make this point. The impacts on homes and businesses won't be to the same number as we've seen before, but the impacts and the magnitude will hit home and hit hard very, very difficultly for a number of people. This community is resilient, it's tough, it bounces back from disasters as well as anywhere in the nation, but that doesn't mean they should be left on their own. They need help, and help they are going to get. I can assure you of that. There will be different communities that are experiencing the impact at different times, and there just can't be any daylight in our response to recovery. And that will happen during the days and weeks ahead, as it has in the months gone by. This has been a system and a season that has tested us in a big way across a large part of this state. But overwhelmingly, people have handled it with great strength and resilience. And that's because of the work that's gone into it. It's because of the people in the emergency services. It's because of the resilience of Queenslanders. And I'm very optimistic about the way that the state will go from response to recovery. And I've got every faith that people will be able to deal with it. They always do. And I'm proud to lead a state that's made up of people who have got strong tickers, and they look after each other. And overwhelmingly, this event has proven that. Mayor, I'm going to hand over to you, and then you can introduce the inspector.
Thanks. Helen Blackburn, Mayor, Bundaberg Regional Council. So we have a few hundred homes and properties that have been impacted, and we won't exactly know what the impacts are until we can get to assess all of these properties. So in the coming day or two, we will be looking to open the bridges again, and we'll also be looking to assess each property individually to ensure that those properties are safe to be habitable for people. So we're making sure that the community's safe. As the Premier said, there was 197 people in our evacuation centre, and there were many more that would have been staying with family and friends overnight. I'm so pleased that the community came together and they followed the instructions of evacuating if they needed to, and keeping each other safe. So I know in the coming days we've got a lot of recovery to do, but as the Premier said, we're resilient, and we definitely will be looking to do the best to make sure that we're caring for one another, and I'm sure we'll get in and do the tough work that needs to happen.
Just read the bridges a day or two. Can you be any more specific? Because obviously a lot of people in North Bundaberg are cut off at the moment.
Yeah, so we are monitoring the water levels, and we would like to think that we may be able to open the bridges later today, but we will need to wait and assess how that is. We need to make sure that if the bridges are open, that the roads on the other side of the bridge are able to be traversed by vehicles. We don't want to open the bridges prematurely and then have people get into trouble with driving through floodwaters.
Do we believe it's already peaked?
We have had a number of assessments of the heights at 7.4 metres, and at that level, and having read those levels a few times, we believe that it has peaked at 7.4. However, there is some tidal movement there, so some of the tide has got it ebbing and flowing. So as that tide goes out, we expect that the flood levels will recede.
Could it still get to that 7.6 mark?
Look, that's the estimate, but we're hopeful that it won't get to 7.6.
Is there a certain number in which it needs to fall before you can open those bridges?
Generally 7 metres is where we need to have the water levels for the bridges to be open again, because that means that on the other side of the bridge people are able to get around on the roads.
7.4, 7.6, there's a lot of numbers, but the fact that it has probably peaked around 7.4, less than 7.6, that means a lot more homes have been spared, doesn't it?
It does mean a lot more homes have been spared, so we're really thankful. If this is what the peak is, we're really thankful that it's peaked there. But you know, today is another wait and see day, and we will just have to see what the rest of the day brings.
Do you have any idea how many homes and businesses so far have been impacted, and any of those people in the refuge centre, were they early warning and they got out, or did we see people overnight having to rush out when they didn't expect to?
Well, we had around 120 people in the evacuation centre at about 5:30 yesterday afternoon, and we ended with 197 people by the evening. So we know that there were additional people that maybe had thought that they would be okay, but then didn't have anywhere to stay. So that was an extra 70 people came out after 5:30. But I mean, they may have been at work and not able to get home. So we're more than happy to have looked after those people in the evacuation centre.
And any idea about roughly how many businesses or homes so far we've seen, if the level peaked where it has?
We're thinking a few hundred homes and properties have been impacted at this stage, and until we get some vision from Polair, who will be flying over the north side and providing streaming back to council, we won't know exactly what's gone on over there. But they will be monitoring for looting. They'll be making sure that any isolated properties up and down the river are reviewed, and we're making sure that people are safe.
Mayor, so those people at the evacuation centre would have been through these sorts of events before. Are you hearing those reports of, this bringing up some tough feelings for locals?
Look, it's certainly some anxiety-ridden times for people that have been through floods before. We know that even heavy rain can cause mental health issues for some people that have been through this time and time again. So I have said yesterday, and I'll continue to say, we all just need to be kind to one another and a bit considerate of people's mental health at this time, because it is a really prominent problem that people have with flooding and with heavy rain. So yeah, it's difficult, and there are people, this is not their first rodeo at an evacuation centre, so we know that those people are impacted, and I've heard from the Minister saying that we will have assistance for mental health for those people that need it.
How worried are you about the macadamia farms and the sweet potatoes and Bundy's food bowl?
Look, we are the food bowl, but in terms of all of those farms, we know that the water goes up and the water comes down, and as the Premier said, we are very resilient, and we've had other disasters that we've gotten through, and we will get through this one as well.
Any idea of the cost of the clean-up?
Not yet.
We've spoken to some locals who say they haven't been able to afford to insure their houses because of past floods.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you can do to mitigate that in the future?
Well, we'll be working with the state to look at whatever things that we can do to mitigate that, but insurance costs have gone up everywhere, but particularly for some of our region, the insurance costs have become ridiculous, and it is something that does need to be addressed.
How long does the clean-up from something like this take?
It can take months. However, I know that the community comes together, and people will go to other people's houses and just get in there and start scrubbing. So it can be as fast or slow, depends on the businesses that have been impacted and what they need in terms of assistance.
Is it likely that we won't know the true extent until at least tomorrow?
It is likely that we won't know the full extent for probably a week.
How long will those emergency services stay around, the extra emergency services?
I believe the emergency services are here until we need them.
Chief Inspector, do you mind if we
Yeah,
ask you
yeah.
a question now?
Yeah. He's
You
trying.
did very well,
Yeah,
thank you, Mayor. Did very well. So just as an introduction, I'm Chief Inspector Grant Marcus. I'm normally the Patrol Group Inspector for here in Bundaberg. Currently, I'm the District Disaster Coordinator for this particular event. So can I just at least start by thanking the community? I think this is really important. Our aim, obviously, is the preservation of life. We've had no lives lost as a result of this incident, which is how we want to keep it that way. The number of events that are calls for service overnight for emergency services was extremely minimal. Thank you very much to the community for heeding the warnings, doing the advice that was provided. As has already been indicated, we had close on 200 people in our evacuation centre. That's a half decent sort of a number, which means that people have decided to move out of their homes because they were going to be impacted. So thank you to the community. Please continue to work with us. We've still got a fair way to go here. This is not over by any means, and we just need to be patient. So I'm happy to answer some questions around certain things, but we've got a long way to go at this stage, as I said. The first thing we need to understand is that the river is peaking at this point in time. We still have a high tide around 2 o'clock today, which will have some slight impact on the height. How quickly the water will recede is quite difficult to determine. It's going to be a case of let's just see what happens. It'll happen as it happens. Now, some of the questions are, when will the bridges open? When will the communities open? We hope to have them open as soon as possible, but we can only do that when we know that that area is safe for the community to go back into, and that people can do what they want to do. So, for instance, there's no point sending people back to actually try and clean their houses when there's no water supply to their area. There's no point sending them back if the toilets and sewage isn't working, or they have no power or anything like that. We have concerns. We need to make sure that there is no issues around people being electrocuted or anything like that. We need to make sure that the roads are safe. We don't want to see trucks and other vehicles driving into these areas and suddenly finding that the road is collapsing under them and things like that. So We say to the community, please bear with us while we go through this whole process. How long will that take? I can't give you an answer, and unfortunately I won't give you an answer at this time, because the reason is I just don't know. It's like, how long is a piece of string? It all depends how much damage is out there and how long it will take us to make it safe so that people can go back. We will be doing the best that we can to ensure that those areas, those pockets of the community here, whether it be from the beach to the bush, is being looked after, and that we have got police in place to secure those areas and make sure that people are safe. That's probably the best thing I can say at this time. I'm happy to answer questions.
Inspector, we heard very briefly before that there was a rescue last night in floodwaters. Do you mind just giving us a bit of
Look, quite simply, it was another idiot driving through flooded waters, okay, where the person had to be rescued. And unfortunately, we had another incident of that this morning in daylight hours. Some people just don't understand the message, which once again puts our people at risk. The one this morning wants another swiftwater rescue job for our emergency services. It's unfortunate to see, but what I can say is, out of all the calls for service, there was hardly any overnight, which is pleasant. It means that our officers out there can start to have a bit of a rest and concentrate on what's important.
As this person drove through floodwaters, was their car stuck? They have to
Yes, the usual thing, unfortunately. Yes, they had to be rescued and removed from it. So, yeah. As mentioned before, there's a lot of roads that are opening up at this point in time. Can I just say to the community once again, resupplies are occurring. The shops are being filled with supplies. Fuel is coming in. Normal resupply processes are in place. There's no need to go out and stock up your kitchen cupboards and fridges and things like that at this point in time. There's no need for that.
Can you talk us through what happened with the water gauge overnight
Yep.
and what people had to do, and if that then impacted any of the readings and locals that were trying to keep up to date with the river levels?
Certainly. So about 100 metres behind me is an automatic river gauge that the council have in place that the Bureau of Meteorology read directly from. So during the middle of the night last night, unfortunately, there was a fault with the system and it stopped being able to provide information direct to the Bureau and to other organisations. You can simply get on the website and look at it yourself if you have to. So what did that mean? Is that meant that every half an hour to an hour we had police officers coming down, taking a photograph of the actual visual gauge that's here and reporting that back to the Bureau of Meteorology and to others that require it. So yeah, that's what we do. We overcome, we improvise, and it was a simple task. Old-fashioned way. And can I say, like 30 years ago, that's how I used to do it. What I can tell you though is the council immediately put people on there this morning to try and rectify that issue. So hopefully it'll be back working as an automatic gauge shortly.
You mentioned earlier that you're worried about people electrocuting themselves going back to their houses. Has the grid been de-energised to those affected properties?
So there are certain pockets that have been de-energised throughout the community for their own safety. The aim will be to look at those individually and determine when we need to re-energise those. And this is what I'm talking about. We do not want to put people going back into community areas that have been impacted if the electricity either hasn't been de-energised or we do re-energise it, it's actually unsafe for them. So yeah, it's really important that their safety is looked after. That is paramount. So we must do that first.
Thank you. I just had a question for the Premier on something separate.
Yep.
On electoral boundaries.
I'll just get the Chief Inspector to duck out if there's anything here.
Is North Queensland getting robbed of representation if Hill is abolished?
I haven't had a chance to go through it. I genuinely haven't. Last night I was down with you guys at the business, and then I had a macadamia farmer last night at the hotel tell me about his impacts, and I've had a couple of MPs on the phone, and it hasn't been about this. It's been about impacts to their community. I have not had a chance to have a look through it, and I genuinely haven't.
If that electorate was abolished, though, would it be getting robbed of its representation?
It's an independent decision, but I haven't had a chance to look at it. I really haven't.
There's also a recommendation around renowned Aboriginal poet and activist Oodgeroo. Do you think they deserve to keep the electorate named after her?
I haven't looked at it. It's a matter for the Commission. I'll make this observation though. What I can promise Queenslanders is whatever the boundaries look like, my focus is on delivering for every Queenslander. And I'd like to think that people have seen that. It doesn't worry me if you live in a small place or if you live in the capital city. I want to be a government that serves every Queenslander. Regardless of where the lines are drawn on a map, that's my focus. But right now, I honestly haven't had a chance to trawl over them. I haven't. I've been dealing with this.
So you don't know whether the LNP would want to erase her name from representing or being on that
But that you're talking about a recommendation from the Commission. I'd say that people can have feedback on that.
When it comes to the Iranian soccer team, Premier, what's next? We did hear Jared Blay say he'll help Queensland in any way. Will help. What does that mean?
He's spot on. I reached out to the Prime Minister yesterday and said if there's anything we can do through police, through housing, to help the federal department, we'll do it. And I think most Queenslanders would acknowledge that should occur. I saw the look of fear in the eyes of those footballers, and I think we've got a duty to help them.
How do you expect that we help?
In whatever the request is. Ultimately, that's a matter for the federal government as to what that asylum looks like and what the mechanics of that is and where it is. But we're all Australians, and we're all compassionate, and if there's something we can do at a state level, we stand ready. And I'd be very surprised if that wasn't the case for the other premiers and chief ministers.
In terms of disaster funding moving forward, do you see that as a state issue or a federal issue?
It's a joint issue, but Queenslanders have seen we work really well together during these events, very well together. I deliberately always ask the mayors to join the calls, the state calls, but I also get the federal government, and the Minister McBain's been very good. She's attended a lot of the meetings over the year and a bit I've been in this job, and there's been a whole heap of events, and that's what people want. I've never met a single Queenslander in their hour of need who wants us talking about different political flavours in different levels of government. They just want us to get in and try and help them, and overwhelmingly that's the feature of the way that we recover. And I make the point, I genuinely believe we are as well prepared as at any time in our state's history, and a big part of that is different levels of government working together. All right, guys, thanks very much for your time. All right.